Hello, and welcome to A Novel Idea, the show where we interview authors. I am your host, Noelle Boc, and today I am here with Anthony Amore.
Hi, Noelle. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you here. So, you have a recent book, The Rembrandt Heist, and we're going to talk all about that. So, what I'll kind of start off with is just give us, obviously I've read your book, so I know all about it, but just give a little background of who you are.
Sure. So for the last 20 years, I've been the Director of Security and Chief Investigator at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. And many people are aware of our museum because it's one of the world's best collections. It's located in Boston. And but some people know our museum because in 1990 it was the victim of the biggest property theft in the history of the world when 13 works of art were stolen from the museum. So part of my job is looking for those stolen paintings. And over the 20 years, I've become an expert in art theft, and I've written 4 books about art crime, and this is my 4th.
Yeah, so which is a really interesting background for somebody to come from too. And obviously, I would imagine most people who are watching know about the Gardner thefts because I mean, huge news, and there's many books about them and documentaries and all sorts of things. But this is not about the Gardner theft. So give us a little glimpse about what the Rembrandt heist is.
Sure. So Massachusetts has a sad history in terms of art theft. I sometimes say tongue-in-cheek, Massachusetts is a really bad place for great paintings. And in 1975, the MFA in Boston, which is across the street from the Gardner Museum, was robbed by an art thief named Myles Connor from Milton, Massachusetts. And Myles is, among other things, the greatest art thief who's ever lived. He's stolen from at least 30 museums, which is really unprecedented. And the book explains why he robbed the MFA in Boston, but along the way it tells you about his other art heists, the methods he used to do them, which are singular in art theft history, and also his interesting friendship that he's had for 70 years with a guy named Al Donnelly, who is a straight and narrow businessman with an equally impressive history in the music world.
And so I thought this was very interesting as well, just these two characters even getting together in the first place, because your book really is more almost a biography, a little bit of Myles, more than it's just about the heist. So it's interesting getting to know these two people as you're going along. And I myself am involved in the Boston music scene, so I was really oh, what? This is a music scene connection and everything too. So I thought that was really extra interesting from my point of view as well. Now talk a little bit, and I'm sure you'll get to other points too, but just talk a little bit about who Myles is.
Sure. Well, so Myles, today he's 82 years old. He was born in Milton, Massachusetts, the son of a police officer, a highly respected police officer in that town. And Myles, from a very young age, caught people's attention. He's not your average person in any respect. And when he was about 14, he was featured in the Boston Globe because he was becoming famous in his neighborhood for his rock and roll guitar playing. And you have to remember, this is before rock and roll's a nationwide phenomenon. I always say it's before the Beatles came, and Myles also was famous in his neighborhood because he was collecting exotic pets. So he had an alligator, and this is in a suburb of Boston, an alligator and a boa constrictor and a python and tarantulas and basically every sort of animal that scares people. But he was never afraid of them, and he's really never been afraid of anything. So the Boston Globe profiled him at a very young age. And then he became, fast forward a bit, he becomes a rock and roll star, a local rock and roll star. As a kid, and I mean a kid, he opened for the Dave Clark Five, who were very popular at the time. In fact, they're the first band to knock the Beatles out of the #1 spot. And grew this large following in Massachusetts. As a young man, he was giving guitar lessons, and that's how he met Al, and they hit it off immediately. Al's a couple of years younger. And it's funny when you see them because one is about 5'6", and the other 6'4". And everything about them is incongruous with each other, but they're the best of friends, and they have been for 7 decades. So Myles becomes famous for his rock and roll persona, but also because he starts pulling off these really daring heists of museums and banks. Is arrested a number of times. So he really is a legend in Massachusetts for 2 different things. And on top of all this, he's a genius. I mean, he has a genius level IQ. He's a member of Mensa. So he's fascinating in a lot of respects. Finally, he's incredibly charming. And people, when they meet him, are really drawn to him. There's this picture that I like to share when I do book talks. To give this example, it's me standing, and then in the center, not really the center, is my fiance who's hugging Myles, and I'm in the picture sort of as like a spare sock, and because he's got that sort of persona, and so that's how I would describe Myles.
And what started Myles off on his life of crime?
I'll tell you a quick anecdote from the book. His first art theft, and it's indicative of what makes him really unique in the history of art crime. It's not just the many art thefts. It's his motives are always different. So whenever you read about an art theft, whether it's the recent Louvre heist, the Gardner heist, you name it, the motive is money. And the money is not coming from some billionaire in a foreign land. That's all movie stuff. The motive is that these people think if I steal a masterpiece, I can monetize it. They quickly learn they cannot, and they never do it again. That's why 99% of people who've stolen art do it once. But Myles has done it numerous times because his motives are different. One day when he was around 19 years old, his father came home from his shift as a police officer, and at the dinner table, the 2 of them, Myles' father was especially sullen, and that wasn't his typical personality. And Myles asked him what was wrong, and his father told him that there had been some antique guns stolen from a local museum, the Forbes house in Milton. And Myles' father was an antique gun collector, and although he had the highest level of ethics and would never do such a thing, the people at the Forbes house insisted he be interviewed by his superiors to see if he had stolen them. And it really hurt him because it was an attack on his character.
Right.
And he explained this to his son, and Myles sat there and said, "They did that to you, Dad?" And his father said, "Yes, son, they did." And Myles finished his dinner, and a few days later went to the Forbes house and stole everything. He broke in at night and stole everything, basically, as revenge. This is what they deserve for insulting my father. And that's his first big heist. And when you read about the many other heists that he pulled off, and I describe many of them in the book,
yes, yeah.
You see his methodology is really something different, and his motives are completely different.
Yeah, which I thought was fascinating as well. And I guess, I never really had thought very much about art theft besides, obviously, you're doing it to make money. Like,
right.
Why else would you steal something? Although we do have, I'm sure you're aware of too, like those scattered people in history that have stolen something and probably just kept it in their house and stared at it for years or whatever. Yeah, very, very few, right? Most of it's motivated by, I'm going to be able to make millions of dollars,
right.
Like selling this to somebody until they figure out that they have no idea how to do that, and then they're stuck, and things never come back.
Right.
Or hopefully,
much later.
Some things probably get destroyed too, right, at some point or whatever. But yeah, Myles seems to have this whole other ethic around that. Is just like, well, I stole this for a purpose that was personal. Like his thefts all seem to be very personal to him, and then. Talk about a little bit like his, I guess his cronies, his band of people who because this is a big deal, right? Like, so you live in Milton, and you're stealing things. Like, what do you do with them? Like, once you have them in your possession, like, what was he doing with this stuff?
Well, first, in terms of his cronies, that's an interesting question because Myles is also really unique historically and something people forget. When he was very active for a few decades, he was operating in a city that was dominated by 2 organized crime gangs, the Irish mob and the Italian mob. And both of them exacted punishment on people who committed crimes without paying them tribute, except Myles. because when Myles was in prison a number of times at Walpole State Prison, which is a maximum security prison and one of the most dangerous prisons in the country at the time, he represented his fellow inmates during riots. They would elect him because of his intellect and his reputation as a very young man, and he would do so well that he built this loyal following of criminals who would do anything for him. And their loyalty to him was stronger than, say, people who did things for organized crime for the money, right? The loyalty is always stronger than finance. Right. So on top of that, he had this ability to tap into them. So when he pulls off the major heist that I describe in this book, he calls a friend and says to him, I need you to help me borrow a painting for a while, which leads to the second part of your question. He would steal things, but the plan was always to give them back when you talk about paintings and such. Or he would steal things that he thought would never be seen by anybody. So he did a lot of theft from collection storage at museums, which is unusual too. So his plan was always to give paintings back, but he would rob banks to get money to buy his greatest passion, which are Japanese swords. And those he collected. So it was this interesting dynamic where he would steal things, try to get ransom for them from the institutions. So that's where his motives are completely different. They're not to steal things thinking he can sell them and then put them in hiding, which is the common outcome of a big heist.
Yeah, which is, again, fascinating. And maybe I probably wouldn't think of trying to ransom something back either. And he was all like really on top of that, which is amazing too. And clearly, and you talk a lot about in the book about his intellect and like how he really would think things through and really plan every detail of his heists, which was why he was so successful, obviously, for for,
I mean, the
for so long.
The heist that the book is named for at the MFA in Boston, and I'll leave it to the readers to see, is the most detailed, most intricately planned out museum robbery I've ever come across, and I've studied them all. I have a database of about 1,500 of them. Wow. And because I need to create a profile, not just to catch art thieves, but to protect the museum. How do they do it? Why do they do it? These details are important to protecting art as well as recovering it. So no one's ever done what he's done, and I don't think anybody ever will. Yeah, the way he is. Well, we're going to take a quick break and have you read a little bit from your book, and then we'll go back to a talk after that. Sure. For more than a decade, I avoided meeting with Myles J. Connor. Connor is a legendary figure in the long and astonishing history of Boston crime. He was infamous for a shootout with the police on the rooftop of a building in the Back Bay. He sensationally broke out of a jail cell in Maine using a fake gun that he fashioned from a bar of soap and some shoe black. He was the subject of a half-dozen separate manhunts, and he twice stood trial for a notorious double murder he did not commit. It was, however, his fondness for stealing art and antiques that made him a near mythical figure, and none of his many heists were bigger than his theft in 1975 of a Rembrandt, then thought to be a painting of the artist's sister. Since 2005, I have been investigating the most famous unsolved heist in history, the 1990 theft of 13 works of art from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. The crime was committed overnight by two men disguised as police officers who used subterfuge to gain entrance to the museum. Once inside, they subdued the two young guards on duty, handcuffed them, wrapped their faces in duct tape, and secured them in the basement while they spent the better part of an hour and a half taking paintings by Edouard Manet, Edgar Degas, Govert Flinck, 3 works by Rembrandt van Rijn, and most notably, a Johannes Vermeer. They also took a Napoleonic flagstaff finial and an ancient Chinese beaker, or gu. Despite the world's largest private reward, $10 million since 2017, my own work and the combined efforts of dedicated agents from the FBI and prosecutors from the Department of Justice Nothing has been recovered as of this writing. When the Gardner theft first hit the news, one suspect came to the minds of criminals and cops alike, Myles J. Connor, Jr. The trouble with that suspicion was that Connor was safely locked up in a federal penitentiary in Bloomington, Illinois, on charges related to narcotics and possession of stolen art. Nevertheless, there's word, possibly apocryphal, that investigators working on the Gardner case placed an urgent call to the Bureau of Prisons for a bed check, just to be sure that Connor had not again escaped incarceration and made his way to Boston that night. It was confirmed that he was indeed in a Bloomington cell while thieves pillaged the Gardner Museum. Though investigators had no strong early leads, the one thing they knew for sure was that the perpetrator was not the world's most notorious art thief. At least not directly, that is.
And I like that you leave that little thing of not directly. Anyway, but there's no evidence linking him that we've ever found to those heists, to that heist particularly, the Gardner heist.
No, but it's a complex question because Myles is the inspiration for these things. And I believe, he was known for committing all these heists, so people were aware art heist was a thing. But this theft in 1975 was so historic because, in a nutshell, the intent was to steal a Rembrandt in order to get out of trouble for stealing 3 paintings by the Wyatts. In the one heist that he was in trouble for committing because he didn't plan it. This is the one heist where he was tagging along with others.
Right.
And it shows because he was ultimately arrested in possession of these paintings trying to sell them. So when he steals this Rembrandt, it's to get out of trouble. And how that happens, I'll leave to the reader, but it's remarkable. And it set a precedent. So it told thieves in the future, over the last 50 years, if you steal these things, you can hold on to them and use them as sort of a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's a negotiating tool. So it's a horrible precedent.
Right, yes.
It's not a good thing.
No.
And I don't want
No.
any of your viewers to think that I think any of this is good. It's terrible. But he's a fascinating character along the way who is also unique because he loves art and antiques. These aren't just valuables to him. Like most people who steal art, they're just valuables. The people who robbed the Louvre didn't do it because they love Napoleon's history.
Right.
Or because they care about the crown jewels. They did it because they wanted to monetize them. They mean nothing to them. And that's the common theme with art thieves.
Right.
They're not Thomas Crown.
Right. And like the Louvre, smart, right? They're stealing jewels that you can break apart and
Yes.
Sell individually so it's not recognizable and all of that. So that's actually, if you're going to steal,
Don't do it.
Don't do it. But if you're going to do it, like that's kind of the way to do it. And yes, in Myles, it really stands out because, as you say, he was basically an art collector himself.
Yes.
I thought it was very, especially because we're here in Danvers and we're next door to Salem, that he spent so much time at now is the Peabody Essex Museum, but what was the Peabody Museum then? And he would talk a little bit just about what he used to do there, because that was fascinating too.
Sure. One of Myles's techniques for stealing from a museum would be to go to an institution with one of his pieces from his collection, posing as a PhD, and ask to speak to a curator to talk about it. Back then, that wasn't as uncommon as it is now. Museums don't like you to bring art to the museum.
Right, yeah.
But he would, and he could talk the talk so well that he could charm the curators, who would ultimately let him into the collection storage space, and he would win their trust, and they would leave him alone in those spaces, and he would steal from them. But when he went to the Peabody Essex Museum, the people there treated him with so much respect, and they were so decent to him that he couldn't bring himself to steal from them, and he just really researched Asian artifacts. In fact, while he was there, he identified somebody who had been stealing from the collection, a janitor. And when it was revealed that he was actually a criminal named Myles Connor, people then thought, well, maybe it wasn't the janitor, it was Myles, but it was not. He would not steal from them because of his affection for the staff.
Which is, again, fascinating. And honestly, that there isn't some full-blown Hollywood movie about him yet.
Yet.
Is like remarkable, just because you're reading this book. I was like, wow, he is like the stuff of legends, and all of those other movies that you've seen that are, have the charming. I'm like, no, he is that guy.
He's that guy,
he is
but
that
in
guy.
a very, very different way. When you think about the movie depiction, the Thomas Crowns, the Ocean's 11, Lupin, all of these people live in these beautiful homes and drive these sports cars and live an extravagant life. That's not Myles. For instance, he robbed 17 banks that he remembers. And back then he would take more than $130,000 at every bank robbery. That doesn't happen nowadays. But he didn't take that money and spend it on a penthouse apartment or a Ferrari. He would buy Japanese swords and antiques with it, because he was a true collector. So he never lived this life of extravagance or, like you see a lot of criminals do. They spend it on cars and jewelry and such.
Opulent lifestyle or whatnot.
He would just take his guitar and go on stage and play to packed houses in Massachusetts in between his crimes.
In between. And talk a little bit about his relationship with Al.
Amazingly, Al, who started off playing guitar with Myles taught him and then learned bass because Myles told him to, found that he could make much more money renting out his speaker system, he had these beautiful speakers, than he could playing on stage. And he's turned that into a remarkable career, a very, very successful career, ultimately touring the world with Dionne Warwick. And again, you have to go back in time to when this happened. I remember when I was writing this, I looked at the music charts, and Dionne Warwick was like Taylor Swift. I mean, every song was
a big star,
huge. And then he was touring with Frank Sinatra.
Yeah,
he was driving the RV that the Rolling Stones were in when they were given their new logo, the famous tongue logo.
Yeah.
He was there. And Al's career has just been incredible and successful. The one thing he wasn't successful at was turning Myles into the superstar he could have been.
Right, yeah.
And I'll wrap it with this on that part is, there's a famous radio DJ, rock and roll DJ from Massachusetts named Charles Laquadera, who's since retired. He was on the radio for decades at this famous radio station. And a couple of days ago, Charles wrote a message to Al on Facebook and said, please give Myles a hug for me and tell him that if he had just stuck with rock and roll, he would be one of the top 5 performers in history right now.
Wow, that's something to say. Yeah, because his shows, from what I'm hearing, sounded like legendary, like what he would do, like just was wild up on stage, which is always exciting, and people are always thrilled to see that kind of thing.
And he was the first doing it.
Yeah.
He wasn't copying somebody.
Right. He was just being Myles.
Just being Myles. Exactly.
just being Myles. I know. Like I read the book and I'm like, I want to meet Myles.
Everybody does. Yes. Yeah.
He sounds like such an interesting guy.
Well, he comes to my book talks often.
Oh, does he really?
Yeah. And he sits in the front, and then people will ask, well, where's Myles today? I'll say he's right here, and he'll get up and sign books.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Because you feel like he's like such a larger than life character, but also, I mean, you lay out like a lot of crime that he's done. So you're like, oh, he must be in jail forever.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh no, here he is.
Yeah, here he is. And interesting, he's done all this crime, and he did get in a shootout with the police in 1966 after they shot first. But he did live by this code, which is why people have so much affection for him, where he would never harm an innocent person. His code said you would never steal from the elderly or harm them. You would never harm a woman or a child. You would never steal from friends, this sort of thing. So he has a lot of loyalty and affection amongst people who know him.
Which is, again, like amazing, like he's such an amazing character because he sort of transcends what we think of, right, for criminals. I mean, he gets along, like the mob leaves him alone, like like what?
A singular character. The other night at a book talk, a person in the audience mentioned they knew Myles. I was like, okay, and then when he came up to me and I signed his book, he worked in the prison system.
Oh, really?
And that's how I met him, and he got choked up and said, Myles saved my life.
Wow.
He's not a sociopath or a psychopath. He has a lot of empathy. He just has a penchant for collecting things with ill-gotten gains.
He's still living a good life, like after even with all of this, right?
He's happy.
He's happy, which is what we all want to be, right?
Exactly.
So
yep.
That's fantastic. Well, let me ask you, are you working on anything else?
Yeah, I'm working on my first novel now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my agent has been pushing me to write a novel about art theft, and I'm giving that a try. You know, it's a whole different.
Yes, very different to write fiction, yeah.
Totally, because, you know, it comes down to the fact that when you write a book, it's nonfiction, the arc is built in, and that's why it's interesting. When you're writing fiction, the arc is on you. So, but it's a fun endeavor.
Yeah.
And I hope it pleases my readers.
So it's a thriller, you'd say, or mystery?
Thriller, mystery, art world, and it sort of is a revelation into what the museum world is really like too. At the same time.
Oh, that'll be cool then. Oh, I like that. All right. I might have to have you back.
Thank you. Thanks.
after that comes out. Now I always ask, because I work at the library down the street, do you have a library card?
I do.
Good man.
I think I might have two actually. I have that the library system card.
Yep.
In fact, my last book, The Woman Who Stole Vermeer, in my acknowledgments I mentioned I wrote it in two libraries. I wrote it at the Athenaeum in Salem, and I wrote it at the in Peabody.
The Peabody Institute, the
Peabody Institute.
The Peabody Institute in Peabody. So we have the Peabody Institute in Danvers as well, but we're not related. Just George Peabody graced us all with money to build libraries.
Great man.
Good man. Good man.
Not great, just good.
Yeah. There's some things I know about it.
Okay, I'll take your word.
And what people should know is that the library does have museum passes for the Isabella Stewart Gardner and the MFA, so you can get discounted admission. So if you want to go check out, you know, any of these cool works or the gaps that are still on the wall in the Isabella.
We do have empty frames, but I always say, and this is a fact, that sometimes people come just to see the empty frames, but when they leave the museum, they never are talking about the frames. They're talking about the courtyard, they're talking about the Titian, the Botticellis, the Rembrandt. So it's totally worth the visit. It's just amazing.
It's a beautiful, I mean, I've been there many times, and it's a beautiful, beautiful museum. I said, if you haven't been, go to the Isabella Stewart Gardner. It is definitely a unique and a very unique space.
It is
as well. Like it was a home, obviously, but yeah, just the work that's in there is fantastic.
It's one of the best collections in the world.
Yeah, and say like I've never been to another place that's quite like it either. Yeah, so it's
the closest probably the Uffizi in Italy, and you know, but the Gardner has its own charm and its own story. You know, Mrs. Gardner's idea of the country needs a great museum, and she built it, and then built an apartment on the 4th floor for herself so she could enjoy it, and then said famously, upon her passing, she said, nothing can ever change. Everything has to stay exactly as I left it, and that's really something special.
It really is, yeah. I would agree with that as well. Well, thank you so much for coming down to chat with me today, and good luck with this book, and we'll have a copy of it in my collection at the library.
Thank you.
And good luck with your new one, and hopefully we'll have you back again.
I hope so. Thanks a million.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for watching, and please tune in again to A Novel Idea next time. We'll see ya.